more practical and called it the Felix Stowe F.1. Porte's innovation of the Felix Stowe notch enabled the craft to overcome suction from the water more quickly and break free for flight much more easily. This made operating the craft far safer and more reliable. The notch breakthrough would soon after evolve into a step, with the rear section of the lower hull sharply recessed above the forward lower hull section, and that characteristic became a feature of both flying boat hulls and seaplane floats. The resulting aircraft would be large enough to carry sufficient fuel to fly long distances and could berth alongside ships to take on more fuel. Porte then designed a similar hull for the larger Curtiss H-12 flying boat which, while larger and more capable than the H-4S, shared failings of a weak hull and poor water handling. The combination of the new Port-designed hull, this time fitted with two steps, with the wings of the H-12 and a new tail, and power by two Rolls-Royce Eagle engines, was named the Felix Stowe F.2 and first flew in July 1916. 21, proving greatly superior to the Curtiss on which it was based. It was used as the basis for all future designs. 22, it entered production as the Felix Stowe F.2, being used as a patrol aircraft, with about 100 being completed by the end of World War I. Another 70 were built, and these were followed by two F.2C, which were built at Felix Stowe. In February 1917, the first prototype of the Felix Stowe F.3 was flown. It was larger and heavier than the F.2, giving it greater range and heavier bomb load, but poorer agility. Approximately 100 Felix Stowe F.3s were produced before the end of the war. The Felix Stowe F.5, designed by Lieutenant Commander John Cyril Porte at the Seaplane Experimental Station, Felix Stowe. The Felix Stowe F.5 was intended to combine the good qualities of F.2 and F.3, with the prototype first flying in May 1918. The prototype showed superior qualities to its predecessors, but, to ease production, the production version was modified to make extensive use of components from the F.3, which resulted in lower performance than the F.2 or F.5. Porte's final design at the Seaplane Experimental Station was the 1-2-3-foot span 5-engined Felix Stowe Fury triplane, also known as Porte Super Baby or PSB. 23, F.2, F.3, and F.5 flying boats were extensively employed by the Royal Navy for coastal patrols and to search for German U-boats. In 1918, they were towed on lighters towards the northern German ports to extend their range. On the 4th of June, 1918, this resulted in 3 F.2As engaging in a dogfight with 10 German seaplanes, shooting down 2 confirmed and 4 probables at Nolus. 12. As a result of this action, British flying boats were dazzle-painted to aid identification in combat. Felix Stowe F-5L under construction at the Naval Aircraft Factory, Philadelphia. Circa 1920, the Curtiss Aeroplane and Motor Company independently developed its designs into the small Model F, the larger Model K, several of which were sold to the Russian Naval Air Service, and the Model C for the U.S. Navy. Curtiss, among others, also built the Felix Stowe F.5 as the Curtiss F-5L, based on the final Porte hull designs and powered by American Liberty engines. Meanwhile, the pioneering flying boat designs of François Denhor had been steadily developed by the Franco-British Aviation Company into a range of practical craft. Smaller than the Felix Stowes, several thousand FBAs served with almost all of the Allied forces as reconnaissance craft, patrolling the North Sea, Atlantic and Mediterranean Oceans. In Italy, several seaplanes were developed, starting with the L series and progressing with the M series. The Machi M.5, in particular, was extremely maneuverable and agile and matched the land-based aircraft it had to fight. 244 were built in total. Towards the end of World War I, The aircraft were reflown by Italian Navy Aviation, United States Navy and United States Marine Corps Airmen. Ensign Charles Hamann won the first Medal of Honor awarded to a United States naval aviator in an M.5. The German aircraft manufacturing company Hansa Brandenburg built flying boats starting with the model Hansa Brandenburg GW in 1916, and had a degree of military success with their Hansa Brandenburg 12 two-seat floatplane fighter the following year, being the primary aircraft flown by Imperial Germany's maritime fighter ace, Friedrich Christiansen. The Austro-Hungarian firm Lona Work began building flying boats, starting with the Lona E in 1914 and the later, 1915, widely copied Lona L. Between the wars. Supermarine Southampton in September 1919. British company Supermarine started operating first flying boat service in the world, from Woolston to Le Havre in France, but it was short-lived. A Curtiss NC-4 became the first airplane to fly across the Atlantic Ocean in 1919, crossing with multiple stops via the Azores. Of four that made the attempt, only one completed the flight. In 1923, the first successful commercial flying boat service was introduced, with flights to and from the Channel Islands. After frequent appeals by the industry for subsidies, the government decided that nationalization was necessary and ordered 5 aviation companies to merge to form the state-owned Imperial Airways of London, IAL. IAL became the international flag-carrying British airline, providing flying boat passenger and mail transport links between Britain and South Africa and India using aircraft such as the short S.8 Calcutta. In 1928, 4 Supermarine Southampton flying boats of the RAF Far East flight arrived in Melbourne, Australia. The flight was considered proof that flying boats had become a reliable means of long-distance transport. Flying boats of Adastra Aero SA at Zurich Horn Water Airport, yet Lieberg in the background, c. 1920. In the 1930s, flying boats made it possible to have regular air transport between the US and Europe, opening up new air travel routes to South America, Africa, and Asia. Foynes, Ireland and Boatwood, Newfoundland and Labrador were the terminals for many early transatlantic flights. In areas where there were no airfields for land-based aircraft, flying boats could stop at small river, lake or coastal stations to refuel and resupply. The Pan Am Boeing 314 Clipper flying boats brought new exotic destinations like the Far East within reach and came to represent the romance of flight. By 1931, mail from Australia was reaching Britain in 16 days, or less than half the time taken by sea. In that year, government tenders on both sides of the world invited applications to run new passenger and mail services between the ends of the empire, and Qantas and IAL were successful with a joint bid. A company under combined ownership was then formed, Qantas Empire Airways. The new 10-day service between Rose Bay, New South Wales, near Sydney, and Southampton was such a success that the volume of mail soon exceeded aircraft storage space. A solution was found by the British government, who had requested Short Brothers to design a large long-range monoplane for IAL in 1933. Partner Qantas purchased 6 short Empire flying boats. Delivering the mail as quickly as possible generated a lot of competition and some innovative designs. One variant of the short Empire flying boats was the strange-looking Maya and Mercury. It was a 4-engined floatplane Mercury, the winged messenger, fixed on top of Maya, a heavily modified short Empire flying boat. 15. The larger Maya took off, carrying the smaller Mercury loaded to a weight greater than it. Dornier du X over a seaport town in the Baltic, 1930 could take off with. This allowed the Mercury to carry sufficient fuel for a direct transatlantic flight with the mail. Unfortunately, this was too complex, and the Mercury had to be returned from America by ship. The Mercury did set some distance records before in-flight refueling was adopted. Sir Alan Cobham devised a method of in-flight refueling in the 1930s. In the air, the short Empire could be loaded with more fuel than it could take off with. Short Empire flying boats serving their transatlantic crossing were refueled over Foynes. With the extra fuel load, they could make a direct transatlantic flight. 15. A Handley Page H.P.54 Harrow was used as the fuel tanker. 15. The German Dornier DuX flying boat was noticeably different from its UK and U.S build counterparts. It had wing-like protrusions from the fuselage, called sponsons, to stabilize it on the water without the need for wing-mounted outboard floats. This feature was pioneered by Claudius Dornier during World War I on his Dornier RS. A giant flying boat and perfected on the Dornier Wall in 1924. The enormous DuX was powered by 12 engines and carried 170 people. 15. It flew across the Atlantic to the Americas in 1929. 15. It was the largest flying boat of its time, but was severely underpowered and was limited by a very low operational ceiling. Only 3 were built, with a variety of different engines installed, in an attempt to overcome the lack of power. 2 of these were sold to Italy. World War II. PBY Catalina. The military value of flying boats was well recognized, and every country bordering on water operated them in a military capacity at the outbreak of the war. They were utilized in various tasks from anti-submarine patrol to air-sea rescue and gunfire spotting for battleships. Aircraft such as the PBM Mariner patrol bomber, PBY Catalina, Short Sunderland, and Grumman Goose were covered-owned airmen and operated as scout aircraft over the vast distances of the Pacific Theater and Atlantic. They also sank numerous submarines and found enemy ships. In May 1941, the German battleship Bismarck was discovered by a PBY Catalina flying out of Castle Archdale Flying Boat Base, Lower Lochern, Northern Ireland. 24. 25. The largest flying boat of the war was the Blom and Voss BV 238, which was also the heaviest plane to fly during World War II and the largest aircraft built and flown by any of the Axis powers. Kawanishi H-8K, 1941-1945. In November 1939, IAL was restructured into 3 separate companies: British European Airways, British Overseas Airways Corporation, BORC, and British South American Airways, which merged with BORC in 1949, with the change being made official on the 1st of April, 1940. BORC continued to operate flying boat services from the slightly safer confines of Poole Harbour during wartime, returning to Southampton in 1947. 15. When Italy entered the war in June 1940, the Mediterranean was closed to Allied planes and BORC and Qantas operated the horseshoe route between Durban and Sydney using Short Empire flying boats. The Martin Company produced the prototype XPB-2M Mars based on their PBM Mariner patrol bomber with flight tests between 1941 and 1943. The Mars was converted by the Navy into a transport aircraft designated the XPB-2M1R. Satisfied with the performance, 20 of the modified JRM-1 Mars were ordered. The first, named Hawaii Mars, was delivered in June 1945, but the Navy scaled back their order at the end of World War II, buying only the 5 aircraft which were then on the production line. The 5 Mars were completed, and the last delivered in 1947. 26. Post-war. Hughes H-4 Hercules. After World War II, the use of flying boats rapidly declined for several reasons. The ability to land on water became less of an advantage owing to the considerable increase in the number and length of land-based runways during World War II. Further, as the speed and range of land-based aircraft increased, the commercial competitiveness of flying boats diminished. Their design compromised aerodynamic efficiency and speed to accomplish the fate of waterborne takeoff and landing. Competing with new civilian jet aircraft like the de Havilland Comet and Boeing 707 proved impossible. The Hughes H-4 Hercules, in development in the US during the year, was even larger than the BV-238, but it did not fly until 1947. The Spruce Goose, as the 180-ton H-4 was nicknamed, was the largest flying boat ever to fly. Carried out during Senate hearings into use of government funds on its construction, the short hop of about a mile, 1.6 kilometer, at 70 feet, 21 m, above water by the Flying Lumberyard was claimed by Hughes as vindication of his efforts. Cutbacks in expenditure after the war and the disappearance of its intended mission as a transatlantic transport left it no purpose. 27. In 1944, the Royal Air Force began development of a small jet-powered flying boat that it intended to use as an air defense aircraft optimized for the Pacific, where the relatively calm sea conditions around the Mani archipelagos made the use of seaplanes easier. By making the aircraft jet-powered, it was possible to design it with a hull rather than making it a float plane. The Saunders Roe SR.A/1 prototype first flew in 1947 and was relatively successful in terms of its performance and handling. However, by the end of the year, carrier-based aircraft were becoming more sophisticated, and the need for the SR.A/1 evaporated. During the Berlin airlift, which lasted from June 1948 until August 1949, 10 Sunderlands and 2 Hives were used to transport goods from Finkenwerder on the Elbe near Hamburg to isolated Berlin, landing on the Havel Sea beside RAF Gato until it iced over. The Sunderlands were particularly used for transporting salt, as their airframes were already protected against corrosion from seawater. Transporting salt in standard aircraft risked rapid and severe structural corrosion in the event of a spillage. In addition, 3 Aquila flying boats were used during the airlift. 15. This is the only known operational use of flying boats within Central Europe. The U.S. Navy continued to operate flying boats, notably the Martin P-5M Mullen, until the early 1970s. The Navy even built a jet-powered seaplane bomber. The Martin Seamaster. Bork ceased flying boat services out of Southampton in November 1950. Bucking the trend, in 1948, Aquila Airways was founded to serve destinations that were still inaccessible. Toland-based aircraft. 15. This company operated short S.25 and short S.45 flying boats out of Southampton and routes to Madeira, Las Palmas, Lisbon, Jersey, Mallorca, Marseille, Capri, Genoa, Montreux and Santa Margherita. 15. From 1950 to 1957, Aquila also operated a service from Southampton to Edinburgh and Glasgow. 15. The flying boats of Aquila Airways were also chartered for one-off trips, usually to deploy troops where scheduled services did not exist or where there were political considerations. The longest charter, in 1952, was from Southampton to the Falkland Islands. 15. In 1953, the flying boats were rechartered for troop deployment trips to Freetown and Lagos, and there was a special trip from Hull to Helsinki to relocate a ship's crew. 15. The airline ceased operations on the 30th of September 1958. 15. Saunders Roe Princess Galen at Farnborough's back show in September 1953. The technically advanced Saunders Roe Princess first flew in 1952 and later received a certificate of airworthiness. Despite being the pinnacle of flying boat development, none were sold, though Aquila Airways reportedly attempted to buy them. 15. Of the 3 princesses that were built, 2 never flew, and all were scrapped in 1967. In the late 1940s, Saunders-Roe also produced the jet-powered SR.A/1 flying boat fighter, which did not progress beyond flying prototypes.